valuable insights for you all. With all of these sessions, we do our best to try and keep these as interactive as possible. So please do get involved. So if you have any questions or any comments, if you could just leave them in the chat box. There should be a little chat box icon on the toolbar at the bottom of your screens. So yeah, any comments, any questions, leave them in the chat box. Alternatively, if you're a little bit like myself and you prefer to speak rather than type, then you can use the raise your hand feature, and we'll get a little blue icon on our screen, and that'll allow us to actually switch your audio feed on. So if you'd like to speak to us rather than type, you can do that. Just a word of warning though, we do record these sessions to publish on our YouTube channel at a later date. So if you do speak to us, your voice will be recorded and published, just so you're aware of that. The reason why we record these things is so that you can share with any friends or colleagues at a later date. So that will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll send an email around to everybody afterwards with a link to that. Before we begin, though, we'd be delighted if you could let us know in the chat box that I've just been talking about. Let us know where in the world you're from and what it is that you actually do. So let us know in the chat box where you're from in the world and what you do. You don't have to share the details of the company you're working for. If you are working for a company, I completely understand you might not want to share that, but just let us know your job role, or if you're a student, let us know what you're studying. So let us know where you're from and what it is that you do. A quick shout out to our partner in today's session, that's stylecareers.com. They're one of the largest fashion-only job listing sites on the internet, and we have the founder who's also on the panel speaking with us. A little bit about myself. My name's Dale. I will be chairing today's session. I'm one of the co-founders here at the Fashion Network here in the UK. Fashion Network is a digital publishing and events business, and we focus on delivering the latest thought leadership and educational and professional development content for fashion and FCMG retail professionals. So if you don't follow us already, you might want to join our networking portal. It's thefashionnetwork.co.uk, or you can pop onto LinkedIn. We're hugely active on that. And you find us on we've got a LinkedIn business page. I think we're about 220,000 plus now. Anyway, I'm going to introduce our speakers. Like I said, we've got a fantastic lineup here today. And joining us is, in no particular order, we have Chris Kidd, as I just mentioned, owner of Style Careers. He's an industry veteran of over 30 years plus. Chris also hosts fashion-specific recruitment and career development events through his portal, fashioncareersfair.com. So that'd be useful for anybody out there in the USA and the North American market. Next up, we have Amy Aberra, who is owner of Fashion Career Consultancy. Amy's got 8 years plus experience recruiting for fashion brands, and also works directly in-house at Boohoo. And whilst Amy was at Boohoo, Amy set up an Instagram page for interns, placements, and students to get CV and interview tips. So that's Amy. Next, we have Karima, Achouham, Mercer, Talent Success Manager at Dweet, educated at the University of Paris Sorbonne, and formerly at Chanel in their marketing and training and educational team. And then finally, we have Rachel Pugh, who's a recruitment consultant focused on fashion at Zachary Daniels. She previously worked as a buyer at quite a senior level, and then came into recruitment last year. She's worked for brands such as Primark, PLT, and Misguided, all based here in the UK. So we've got a good panel of both luxury fashion experience and fast fashion experience. My colleague Mia is going to actually put up a poll for you all to answer. As soon as the slides go, you're going to see a poll on your screen. And what we would like you to do is to fill that out. The poll is, have you ever used AI to write your CV or cover letter? So have you used AI to write or help you write your CV and or cover letter? So yeah, so we'd be delighted that if you could just basically put that on, and so we can have a understanding where you guys are up to. So that's fantastic. I noticed a few hands up already. So if you don't want to speak to us just yet, please, lower your hands. We will come to you. So while the poll's going out, I'm just going to ask Chris, what do you think the response is going to be to this as
You
you?
know, yeah, I think everybody, I mean, at least in the States, everybody's dabbled a little bit with using like Chat GPT for either resumes or cover letters. And then I'll apologize. We use the term resume. I know CV is more common internationally, right? But we found that at least our research, and we've hosted a couple webinars on this, on using, AI to write your resume has been really helpful for people. And, we are a big proponent in customizing resumes for every application, and using an AI to, alter your resume, optimize it for applicant tracking systems is a big plus for people. It allows people to be a lot more efficient and a lot more exact with their applications.
So if we got the poll results, Mia, here we go. So, oh, that's interesting. So 61% of our audience hasn't used AI, and 39 have, and that's out of that. So that's 56 people have used it, and 88 haven't. That's interesting. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Mia. So does that come as a surprise, anyone? Amy, does that come as a surprise to you?
I was just thinking, I actually don't think it is a surprise, just because I think with AI, I feel like it's a new sort of technology that people are only just starting to really use and talk about, especially in the UK. So actually, when I've spoken to people at different levels, people aren't really using it in a sense of using it for their CV or cover letter, I don't think yet, but maybe this time next year, I feel like that statistic could be slightly different and maybe more people will be using it. So I think people are definitely manually writing their own CVs still, or cover letters currently, but that could change, you never know.
And Karima, do you think you could spot an AI written CV yourself, or?
I think it depends on the function, the role, the profile, and the position they apply for, because obviously it's an exercise. They rework the resume, but yeah, I think sometimes you can detect it. But it's true that most of the talents we have in our community really pay a lot of attention. So they really gather, I think, enough information prior to the application about the company. So even if this is a starting point and a great starting point, usually they're pretty good at tailoring it and personalizing it.
So we've got a fantastic audience here today. We've got over 170 people from all over the world here. Just gonna have a quick nose, actually. We've got Rhiannon here from Wales, Sandra here from South Africa, Cambodia. We've got a few people over there. Jenny from Manchester in the UK. Hi, Jenny. Andrea from Texas. We've got another Texan in here, Chris. Welcome, Andrea. Who else we got? Diana from LA. It must be early for you. Good morning. Angie from Venezuela. So we've got a fantastic spread from people from all over the world. So hopefully you guys are going to get some value out of it. My first question, I might come to you first on this, Rachel. So my first question really that I've got here is, obviously given things like LinkedIn and the various other CV generators, and we've just mentioned a little bit about sort of AI, how important is the sort of traditional CV to you guys, given the fact that obviously we have LinkedIn and stuff like that? So I'll come to you, Rachel, on that. How important would you say this traditional CV as we've known it to date is?
I'd still say, obviously, it's probably more important, but I'd say only because of the level of detail that you're able to go into on a CV versus what people, I think, naturally do fill out on LinkedIn, because a lot of people on their LinkedIn profile may just put, obviously, their job title and the types of businesses that they've moved to. Whereas I guess in a lot of the fashion industry in particular, a lot of those roles within head office, you do want to know the detail around kind of the areas that somebody's worked on, maybe the departments, and kind of like, I guess, the technical kind of side to it, which a CV allows you to really elaborate, which LinkedIn sometimes doesn't. But I still think LinkedIn is so important. I actually say to quite a lot of people, you don't really realize or maybe utilize the power of it sometimes. I think your LinkedIn profile versus your CV can actually offer like your personality up a lot more than your CV. So I guess like engaging with other people's posts, reposting things yourself that you're seeing in like, I don't know, fashion articles, for example. And yeah, I think you can kind of just bring yourself to life a little bit more on LinkedIn versus your CV. So I think they go hand in hand.
And what do you sort of what's the first thing you look at then? Would it be the CV or the cover letter or the LinkedIn profile or something else? What's the first thing you look at? And what's the thing you probably judge the most is what I really want to ask.
What I judge the most.
Yeah.
Probably layout. I like
Yeah.
it to be almost, and it's probably just personal reference, but almost straight to the point, quite short, snappy, concise, keeping it really top line. What are your greatest achievements? And I think the first thing I definitely do always read is the bio of somebody's profile on a CV.
Mhm.
And then naturally, as I guess being a recruitment consultant, I do often cross-reference it with somebody's LinkedIn to make sure it is quite literally exactly the same in terms of chronological order, or that you've maybe not missed anything out on your CV that you might have on LinkedIn, saying if you've done an internship or work experience or something like that.
And then Karima, can I bring you in on this? What's the first thing you look for when you get a CV in your inbox? Can you just talk us through that?
So versus LinkedIn or a resume?
Yeah, versus
Yeah.
LinkedIn versus what's the
So I
first thing you
think,
go to?
yeah, so obviously the experience, the depth of if a profile has worked on different types of products and brands, it's also really interesting to see the length of the experience. Sometimes it's not about the length, it's about the strategic level of the project they might have worked on. I think what is also very interesting in a resume is understanding how you've been collaborating with other departments within a specific structure, or for a certain project, who were you interacting with? And this is usually a really important information for the brands, especially when they want someone operational quite quickly and with a good level of understanding of how do you engage everybody around your work, your project, what you're developing. So that's a super important.
How do you get that from a CV then?
Sorry.
No, carry on.
Yeah, so I think there are different ways. So first of all, a knowledge of how brands are structuring the different functions. So reading the brand background, you understand if the person has evolved, has worked in a small structure, a bigger one, if there was a merchandising department, for example, for very creative profiles, who would work with the design teams to build a collection plan at the beginning, or if there wasn't, then it gives also a very good understanding of, okay, this role as a designer in this company means that I have to work on like the full parameters of the creation process, for example. Mm-hmm. So it would be the brand background, but also I tend to recommend as well, snappy and sometimes just bullet points, the departments they usually work with and interact with and co-build a collection, a line, a product, or a project.
And then Amy, what do you look at first? CV, LinkedIn profile, or
I'd probably look at the CV first and then go to someone's LinkedIn profile. I guess not everyone has LinkedIn. That's what I've probably noticed with some candidates, is that they just have a CV, might not have a LinkedIn profile for whatever reason that is. So always a CV first and then LinkedIn, and probably similar to what the other guys have said, structure is probably the first thing. I think the first thing I would probably look at, like Rachel said, is the profile and the summary, because I think that will quickly indicate what role they're applying for, what level of experiences they've got, and just give you a bit of an insight into them as a person. So that's the first thing I always probably look at, and also judge as well, because I think sometimes some people don't have a profile and go straight into it, and it can be quite like a short CV that doesn't give much detail into who they are, what they've done, or anything. So I really think a profile or a bio or a summary is really critical in a CV. I probably think it's the number one thing that you need to include. just to summarize who you are. And also, I think you need to definitely put what role you're applying for and even the brand reference. So you're already mentioning like keywords and key attributes and key skills that you've got, because a lot of the brands that people apply for have or use applicant tracking systems where keywords are quite important. It'll rank your CV higher. So I think that profile summary is probably the first bit of the CV, or yeah, I guess first bit of the CV that you want to be showing that you're relevant for that role. So yeah, definitely a CV first is what I would look at.
And Chris, when we spoke about when we were in the planning of this session, you were talking about that a lot of people don't realize that actually the applicant tracking system is actually, it's almost a form of SEO now. Do you want to sort of, you had quite a few things to say when we spoke about this.
Yeah, my perspective is a little different than the talent acquisition panelists, in that I own a job board where people create profiles, they upload their resumes. We just did a big webinar. You can find it on StyleDispatch.com, our careers blog, about optimizing your online profiles. The big difference typically between your CV or your resume and your online profiles is that your resume or your CV is going to allow you to communicate your soft skills a lot better than necessarily a profile, right? Typical profiles ask you, where you worked, when you worked, and maybe some of your basic skills, but that doesn't allow you to, typically doesn't allow you to express the soft skills that you have. And applicant tracking systems look for both hard skills and soft skills. And so that's where you can get that across. And, I always use the word resume. I know CV is a much more popular word internationally. For us in the States, a resume is a selling document. It's not a list of where you worked. It's a marketing document that sells your expertise and your value to a company, right? And so with the summary statement, with a list of accomplishments, hard skills, soft skills, it really allows you to get your professional essence across easier than most profiles. Now, that being said, with both your CV and your profile, they definitely have to be optimized for both applicant tracking systems and recruiter searches. If an agency recruiter is looking for someone to fill a specific role, they're going to use keywords, and it's your job as a job seeker to make sure you're anticipating those keywords and that you're coming up in these searches. A difference between technical designer and tech designer, those are different keywords, and you're going to get different results depending on how the recruiter's searching. Merchandiser, planner, allocator, these are all roughly the same things, you know what I mean? But, how is the recruiter searching for these things? What are the skills involved? What are the tools that you're going to use from a technology standpoint? Having those keywords on your resume and your profile is huge for being able to be found by recruiters and getting past these applicant tracking system bots.
We're getting quite a lot of people sending their LinkedIn profile links. I don't think we're going to get a chance to have a look at everyone's LinkedIn profile in here, guys. So it'd be good if you could sort of maybe just confine it to any questions or comments in the box. Also, we've got a hand up from Sadie. So Sadie, if you've got a question, keep your hand up. If not, just you might want to put it down, because otherwise we'll put you live. Obviously, the focus today was creative CV and portfolio. And Rachel, you mentioned just briefly about the layout of the CV and what should a creative CV look like, because I've had discussions and debates with friends of mine who work in similar roles to you about CV should follow this format and should be focused on this. What's your thoughts about how the CV should look like from a layout point of view?
I think it's a real debate at the moment, isn't it? I think at the end of the day, it's the content that's in there, so it can look amazing, but at the end of the day, the recruiter, like ourselves or the brand themselves, they'll still be looking for something within your skill set and essentially what you have to offer. So I don't mind a creative CV, but I don't think I probably appreciated it for the amount of work that some people do put into it. So I do always kind of guide people and saying don't spend days and hours of making it really eye-catching or anything, because at the end of the day it is the content that's written within it that's going to get somebody either dropping you an email or giving you a call.
So what's the difference, and this is to anybody who wants to pick this up, what's the difference between a creative CV and a CV then? I think
sometimes with creative, I do sometimes naturally end up going towards designer, because a lot of the time they may put in some relevant work at the back of the CV. It might start with the CV, and then there might be some, you know, relevant work in there, like mood boards, some sketches or CAD lineups or anything like that. I do think that's really relevant with design in particular, because it can give a brand a really good gauge, essentially, on like your commercial eye or like your handwriting. But in terms of like buying or merch, for example, I think just nice chronological, again, pure content, all there, all the detail. I would say that's probably the difference, probably the role.
And Karima, from your perspective, what do you like a CV to look like from a creative point of view?
I think I'm pretty much aligned with what Rachel has just described. I think what is really interesting to see in a creative CV is the type of lines and collections they've worked on. So if it's a fashion show collection, sometimes we make the mistake to assume that if a luxury brand is hiring a designer, it's going to be to work on the very creative and fashion collections, when actually they would really want to find a profile who can add some kind of commerciality or you know, just bring something that would be for a ready-to-wear collection. So a creative CV, I think what is interesting to see on it is if you've collaborated on, I don't know, building a fashion show, if it's a digital creative, could be the launch of a very unique project. Doesn't have to be long, but something, yeah, that had a huge amount of success. I think that's pretty interesting. There's also something I learned actually over the years working with the clients and the brands, and I think it's even more relevant for some specific brands. They also want to see or know a bit more about your creative process. And at the beginning, it was quite surprising and interesting, but it does make sense. And again, I'll go back to the structure of, you know, a brand and the design team. In a design team, you can have someone dedicated to do the trend forecast, material research, but it's not always the case for some brands, when the designer would have to do absolutely all of it. And your ability as well to play, you know, with the brand's DNA and the different materials. We tend to have, some interest from the client to explore this. So again, it doesn't have to be detailed in a resume. It's just bullet points on how you experiment, in your creative process.
Summary sales document, basically. 3D
design, absolutely.
We'll come on to portfolios in a minute, but there's an interesting question I've just seen popped up in the chat box, which got me a bit, which is, how do you avoid repeating your CV in a cover letter? Who'd like to pick that one up? Amy?
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't know if my point might be a bit controversial, but I actually don't really agree with cover letters. I think I do actually think it's a bit of a waste of time, because I do think that that's the point, you are repeating yourself constantly. So I think what I found is a lot of brands nowadays have removed like cover letters from their sort of systems and their process, because I've always found it's a bit of an old-fashioned way actually to recruit, and maybe a bit too traditional. And actually, I think the brands that I recruit for or I've worked for don't really use it anymore. So actually, I think they'll be able to find that level of detail in a CV. So I do think it's sometimes not as relevant, but then there's other cases where I know fashion brands do have it as a mandatory option still to have a cover letter. So then I would probably suggest, if it is mandatory when you are applying for roles, then I think you want to keep it, I guess, like similar to your profile, super concise in terms of like tell them who you are, key skills, what you're applying for, why I've applied for the brand, and then trying to direct it as much to your CV, because I just think you will end up repeating. But at the same time, it's not a bad thing if you do, because you're just going to show that you do understand the role even more. If you putting it in your cover letter, you put it in your CV, they'll just be able to understand that you understand the role and who they are as a brand and why you want to apply for that brand specifically. So it's not a bad thing if you repeat a lot. And like, you know, Chris has said, with the applicant tracking system, using as many keywords as you can will actually help. If you are putting them in your CV and covering letter, it's only going to benefit you.
Karima, you were nodding furiously then when Amy was saying about cover letters. Do you agree?
I can't agree. Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Amy. The cover letter is, we've never been requested to put it forward. And I think the best way, obviously you would want to say a little bit about your personality and your passion and what's, so you know, something snappy in the summary, in a short bio. It doesn't have to be a cover letter, just 4 lines is enough. I used to say that, balance is super important when it comes to the content of your CV, but also your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a balance between, giving a good glimpse of what you've done, your skills, your soft skills, but not too much. At the same time, you don't have to put absolutely everything. And it's also really good to leave some for the next steps. I think saying this, also showing that you are ready to develop something, a little project, something just to show how you could, I don't know, reinterpret brand's DNA for a certain position, a project, whatever, but actually showing that readiness to tailor a little project. I think that's always inviting.
And before we move on to portfolios, I'm just going to read out a couple of quick questions, and if we could just get a quick answer as well, because I want to try and get onto the portfolio bit. But someone's asking about, should the CV be a 1-pager, or was that a myth?
Hey, can I jump in here?
Yeah, of course you can, Chris.
Yeah, so you know, you should always have 2 versions of your resume, one for show and one for go, right? The one for show is that pretty one that you hand to the recruiter, right? Or if you're emailing it to somebody. Back in the day, if you got gray hair like me, you literally pulled it out of a leather portfolio. You know what I'm saying? The one for go is the one optimized for an applicant tracking system, right? If you have less than 10 years of experience, 1 page on the show version of your resume, the pretty version of your resume. Applicant tracking system, it doesn't matter. Make sure you've got every keyword that you need to have, everything that's going to make sure that your resume gets picked up by the screening bots, right? The go version, the optimized version, the system doesn't see page breaks necessarily. So you want to have, you know, 1-page resume CV for anyone less than 10 years experience. It doesn't matter with the applicant tracking system version. What we see actually is that the VP level, the design directors, they are more likely to have a 1-page CV than a kid right out of college. You know what I mean? Because they have they're able to be concise with the way they speak. They don't have to prove themselves as much with, you know, different jobs that have nothing to do with the fashion industry. You know what I mean? And so that's just my 2 cents on it, right?
And then someone from Angelica's here says she puts her CV normally through Illustrator. If she does that, does that mean keywords cannot be picked up in? Okay, there's your answer there, Angelica. We're getting massively inundated here with questions, guys. We're going to try our best to answer as many as we possibly can, but I want to talk about portfolios. Who wants to pick up portfolios first? What's a good portfolio look like to you? Who does sort of the most creative recruitment? Who wants to pick that
real
one?
quick? I'm sorry to jump in again.
No, that's fine.
I don't evaluate a lot of portfolios, but I can tell you on your resume, right below your name, right below where it says you're a designer, have a link to your online portfolio immediately at the very top. Behance is good. Coraflot, you might do your own like Wix website. We have styleportfolios.com, but you have to have a link to your portfolio. It's such a big deal.
And where should that portfolio live? I mean, like you say, in the old days, you've got a couple of grey hairs, Chris. I've got no hair, so I think we've been around the industry a little while. I mean, it was the old big leather thing. I mean, where does that live nowadays? Is it, you know, Pinterest? Is it on platforms like yourselves? I mean, where should your portfolio live?
Well, of course, we're going to say try styleportfolios.com, but Behance is a great site. Coraflot's a great site. You know, a lot of people will have their portfolio in multiple locations. You know what I mean? Because you want to use your portfolio as a tool for passive contacts from recruiters. So you want to have your portfolio on a couple different sites if you can. If you've got your own site, which is fantastic, just remember that site's not going to be picked up by most searches where it would on Coraflot, Behance style portfolios, right? And I don't, maybe there's a better maybe there's different portfolio sites that are used internationally, but those are the big ones in the States. And then, I think you still need to have a hard copy version of your portfolio for interviews. You know what I mean? And then there's also that, and then, evaluation projects also, but you got to have an online portfolio in today's recruitment era. You just have to.
And Karima, you work in the French market. Would you concur with what Chris is saying, or do you think slightly different there?
Absolutely. We receive, for every designer position, we receive hundreds of applications. And if I can give one of the top recommendations is, first of all, to have 2-3 different versions of portfolio, and I'll get back to that. And second, I totally agree, have it ready. We transfer, when it's not immediately accessible, it makes the process much longer, because then by the time the recruiter, get to your profile and requests it, you can lose 2-3 days. And the momentum is, you can really miss some opportunities. So a portfolio that is available on a website, on a drive, not too heavy either, because not all the brands have the capacity as well, to browse heavy portfolios. But have it very ready, and being ready as well to personalize it. If you are being contacted for a designer role, you collect information about what are the criteria for which type of project. Be quick in personalizing it. That's really, really key. Yeah.
Quick question from Roxy here. Is it okay to show a portfolio on an iPad at an interview? Who's got thoughts on that? Amy, you're nodding.
I was just reading the questions actually. Yeah, I would say so. I think 21st century, I think you're able to show it anyway if you can do it on an iPad, or I would always say physically is better, but I think if you can show it on an iPad, I've never been in an interview where a hiring manager or a head of design or design manager has said they don't want to see it that way. I think to be honest, it's more how you present it rather than how it sort of physically looks. So I think whether it's an iPad or physically in person, I think either way is fine. And I think a few people have said as well, doing portfolios on Canva, that's really good as well. That's another way to sort of highlight it and have it as a link. I've definitely seen that recently, or a Google Drive PowerPoint link. That's absolutely fine. So yeah, either of those would work.
With older job seekers, it's kind of advantageous to show your portfolio on an iPad. It seems a little more tech forward, and the big knock on older job seekers is they don't get the tech. You know what I'm saying? And so if you've got a designer in her 50s like me, and she brings in a big leather portfolio, it gets viewed as old school. If you pull out a nice iPad and you're showing the images like that, you just seem a little more tech forward, a little more with it, whether you are or not. That's the perception a lot of recruiters get. And so that's helpful for older job seekers. If ageism's a deal in Europe, it's a big issue here.
That's another whole different webinar, that one is, I think. Mariana's put a question in. What does a portfolio look like for someone not doing design? Do you want to just elaborate on that, Mariana? Because I think, are you a marketeer or something like that? Unless you guys understand that question, and I don't. Rachel, Amy, Karina, what does a portfolio look like for someone not doing design? Surely you wouldn't have a portfolio, I would imagine.
I mean, people do have portfolios in marketing and other areas of fashion, not just necessarily design, if that is what she means. So I think if that's what she means, and you can still present a marketing portfolio, whether it's like social media campaigns that you've done or anything like that, then still present it the same way, if that's what she means.
I think sometimes as well, like alongside buy-in, some brands will have product developers. So some product developers might also have a portfolio, whereas it's just a bit more technical. It'd be more of your examples of like tech packs, specs, working with factories, and like the actual selection you go through. But yeah, it is probably more of like a creative role where you've got a portfolio attached to it versus like buying a merch probably.
So that's marketing, design, etc., etc.
Yeah, there is. If I can just add something, for example, there's a huge demand at the moment on from fashion brands on fabric and materials and components research, creative research and development. And yeah, showing a portfolio, it doesn't have to be of samples, but candidates more and more show looks from fashion shows or looks from showroom that shows the details of the fabrics and basically the wide range of creative fabrics that they can develop.
Oh, here's a good one. I'm not sure what Salma I think from. For design job seekers, should a portfolio be more visual or text orientated? Well, I would imagine visual. You guys can correct me on that. And are animated video portfolios in demand at the moment? Animated videos. Who wants to pick that up? I can see Rachel, you're poised on a point.
I personally have never had an application or a candidate with an animated video, for example. I actually think as well, naturally a designer's CV will have some level of imagery or something in there, but I think it kind of does come back to the point of that first page does need to kind of sell you and your capabilities and your skill set. And then following on from that within kind of the deck, as you like, you could have a small glimpse into your capabilities or like projects you've worked on or areas that you've, been the designer for. So yeah, bit of a mix. I'd definitely say it still needs to start with that, I guess, the traditional CV at the start with then some examples at the back.
And then one here about our portfolios for fashion marketing roles helpful or not? Amy, you're nodding.
Yeah, I would say so. I definitely think it's probably something that I've seen more over the past year or two in terms of portfolios. I always think any examples of work help, especially if you've maybe not got as much experience, or even if you do, I don't think it really matters. But I do think having a fashion marketing portfolio helps. So, for example, with social media or graphic design roles, I've noticed a lot of people are showing those examples of work on a 1 or 2 page slide deck and sending it along with their CV. And I just think it helps show examples of work and highlights of what you've done in your previous roles. Or if you've not got experience, then again, I actually think creating a portfolio helps. So if you are looking to apply for a social media assistant role, you want to show your social media capabilities. And actually, if you've done stuff for your own personal social media or just helped start up brands or done freelance, then again, actually having physical examples of work help because people want to reference something. So actually, I think people will look at that and be like, okay, this is their capabilities. So I actually always say to people applying for any role, even with buying, I always say, even try and do a mini SWOT analysis, because actually a lot of interviewees will say, we'll probably have to do a SWOT for the first stage interview. And actually, I think if you do that ahead of the game, or even like a customer analysis, then you're sort of showing your skill sets already and just showing what you know about the role. So again, it's just showing examples of your skills and capabilities for the roles that you're applying for. So anything that you can add, whether it's a portfolio or a SWOT or a target consumer profile, I think having that alongside your CV will always make you stand out.
Just to everyone out there listening in, if you want to have a look at the chat box as well, there's some interesting conversations and questions, which we're not going to cover all of them, I'm afraid, but there's some interesting insights and comments in there. It'd be worth having worth having a look through. So we've spoke a little bit about CV, we spoke a little bit about portfolio, what should be in them. My next question is, I want to sort of ask you from both a CV and a portfolio perspective, big no-nos, what are the biggest no-nos that you've come across, sort of avoidable mistakes? And Karina, can I come to you first on this? What are the sort of the big things that you think,
I would say, don't try to come up with something that is what the brand is already developing. Don't try to copy. If it's a mood board that you would use to and you've developed a little project to give an idea of how you could usually the brand wants to see what would be the added value, wants to see how It can be within another brand. If for younger profiles, during your studies, one of your student projects, this is something you could show as well. I think they want to see your ability to play with some brand DNA, but don't try to copy basically the style that of the brand to which you're applying. Yeah.
Rachel, mistakes to avoid. What are your thoughts? Both, if you could do CV and portfolio.
I'd say accuracy with CVs and probably portfolios as well, to be fair. There's a lot of bios that you come across on CVs when somebody, for example, if they're applying for a buying job, but it will say I'm an ambitious marketing, like I want to get into marketing, and then instantly that's a red flag for me because I'm thinking, well, what's the reason for applying for this role? So I think like the accuracy thing is massive. And I'd also say what ties into that is the relevancy as well. So on your CV, obviously have it in chronological order. I think if you're straight out of uni, have your uni degree straight at the top. So I know exactly what you've studied and been invested in for the last 3 or 4 years. Same with like any industry experience or placements. I'd say that's probably the biggest one that always catches me as a red flag.
Amy, avoidable mistakes?
I think with the CV, I don't know if this is controversial again or not. This is just my personal opinion. I really don't like profiles being written or a CV being written in third person. I don't think it sounds personable. I don't think it sounds or flows great. So I always think just write it in first person, rather than say, just like I am an ambitious whoever, rather than Amy is an ambitious person. It just doesn't sound right. And also sometimes people have a reference as a profile, so they'll have like their last job reference from their old manager as their profile, and that can be their opening of their CV. Again, I don't think it sounds great. I think it's better just to have you writing it in first person. And then avoidable mistakes in the portfolio is that I think a lot of people, especially straight out of university, will have their own profile that they've portfolio that they've done in uni, which probably doesn't relate to the roles that they're applying for. So I always think, again, just going above and beyond, like doing extra work and doing a portfolio that relates to the target consumer and the target brand that you're applying for. So if you do a women's wear degree and you've got a women's wear portfolio, don't use that to apply for a menswear brand, because it's not really showing your capabilities. It's probably better for you to just do a quick 3 to 5 piece collection or something minimal, and showing that. Send your women's wear one as well and say that's what you've done in your degree, but actually you want to get into menswear because of X, Y, and Z, and then send that over. I think that's probably what I would suggest.
The third party thing is the one that stuck with me. I would also certainly say don't refer to yourself in the third person when you're in the interview as well. I think people that do that, it's really,
it's a bit bizarre.
really rather strange. Chris, what's from your point of view, from both CV and portfolio, big mistakes to avoid?
But the biggest thing for me is don't write I've got a passion for fashion. Just don't do that. Bugs the shit out of me. I can't stand it when people do that. There's some mechanical things that people need to do, like don't have your full address on your CV. There's in this day and age, people can use that for phishing scams. They can use it for creepo stalking stuff. The city and well, for here it's city and state, whatever the equivalent is where you live. Don't give your full address. You gotta nix objective statements. Objective statements are the worst. You know what I mean? You can't, it always paints people into a box. It's better to have a summary statement than an objective statement. I think a big thing with student resumes is students always want to tell an employer what the student wants out of this. I want to learn and grow, and the employer doesn't care. The employer wants to know how you're going to help them. So, anything that's about how you want to grow, just get rid of that. Let's see here. Little things like references upon request. That's from the 80s. Don't put that on your resume anymore. I think that's it. 2-page resumes for entry-level job seekers. That's something that's just really annoying. I think those are the big things. I think with a big thing with the experienced job seekers is you have to build a return on investment analysis with your resume. You have to show that you've made accomplishments, and people that fail to do that, I think, are at a big disadvantage in the evaluation process of recruiting.
And do you get involved with portfolios, Chris, with your platform?
Yeah, with portfolios, the big deal for us is showing progression. We want to go from concept to market, and we want to see that in your portfolio, right? So if you can end your portfolio with, pictures of marketing slicks where this was, the product was being sold, that's solid gold, right? You show the concept, you show the paper dolls. I don't know what y'all call them. We call them paper dolls. And then you can show the marketing, and then maybe something from like Women's Wear Daily. I think y'all call it drapers there. Like that, if you can show the commercialization, if you can show the value to people, I think you're much more likely to get a second look from your portfolio.
I've got a funny comment in the chat box here from Salma, just following on from your passion for fashion comment. She's put in there and void the word fashionistas. I don't know what.
Please get rid of it.
Brilliant. So we've talked about CVs, talked about portfolios, things to put in, things not to put in. Obviously, we sort of angling this talk a little bit around creative candidates. So I'd be interested to sort of spin around all of you now and just get an idea of what the key things that employers look for, particularly in creative candidates. Is there anything specifically that you are looking for that we haven't mentioned? Karima, I'm going to come to you first on this, if that's okay. When you are looking for, I've got friends that work and own brands, and I know sometimes when they're recruiting creative candidates, they're looking at, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but looking at their shoes and what they're wearing, all that kind of stuff. Is there other things that recruiters particularly look for creative candidates?
I think that they really want to understand your ability to work with something that is already conceptually defined, and how you can reinvent that and play with it. So I think, when I talked about balance earlier, it's showing creativity, agility, and diversity. And actually, it's not an easy exercise, but if you can try to convey that through your portfolio, and as well the way you sell yourself in a resume, being ready to explore new categories. When you show your portfolio, you have been working, sorry about that. You have been working on very specific categories, but on the side, you might have been experimenting other categories. Try to include that. I think this is, what the recruiters want to see. And another very important advice I would give to all the candidates, to be really ready and relevant when they apply to a position and when they meet the recruiter. Try to gather as much information about the context of that recruitment. Don't assume that a luxury fashion brand, an edgy fashion brand would necessarily recruit or look for profiles who are going to work on the next fashion show collection. There are multiple lines and collections and strategies, so that will definitely determine which kind of profile they would look for. So with your recruiter or the person who's putting you in touch, if you work with an agency, with the client, so try to really collect as much information as possible. Saint Laurent might be willing someone who has worked for a very commercial brand, because they don't have that in the team, and they want to build a team to, develop the next commercial small leather goods line. I mean, that's super important. A lot of information. Who are you going to work with? A designer. Do they have in this team to also work a lot on the material research, or it's just pure design? Who are they going to work with? Who are they co-working with if they have to build a collection? I mean, all these information is super important.
A relationship sounds really important for what you do. Sounds really important. That's the one thing that gets across when you speak. Rachel, creative candidates. I know you guys recruit across the whole spectrum, but is there anything specific you look for in creative candidates?
I think I just want to be taken on a journey, essentially, from quite literally, if it's the start of the season, I do want it to be really clear in terms of how you've got from that initial idea and moved it all the way through. And I actually think it comes back to something Karima said at the start of the call about being able to work cross-functionally as well. So if you're going from, I don't know, you might start with like the mood boards or catwalk, then how that layers into understanding your customer profile of who the target market might be. Instantly I'd be thinking, okay, you'll probably be quite aware of buying and how, much commercial information they're able to give you as a designer, and then moving it right through to like your technical ability as well with sketching or CADs, and then quite literally almost what Chris said as well, that finished article, if you've got examples of product once it's gone onto site or into stores, include them, because you're able to quite literally do a bit of storytelling and take somebody on a journey with it.
And Amy, anything that you think that key things that employers look for in a creative candidate?
I don't think there's probably much more else to add than what the guys have said. I think what people want is, I think when people think of, say, creative CVs, just sort of going back to that, as I think people think that you've got to go all out. I mean, you see on LinkedIn people sending like dolls' houses or like cakes to their CVs inside. I think people think that's what a creative CV needs to be to stand out and get a job. And don't get me wrong, I think if hiring managers were on this call, they might have a different opinion because they probably love receiving CVs like that. But actually, when it comes to it, I think a creative CV, which is probably a similar point to a creative candidate, is that they just need to make sure that, their information is probably reflecting who they are as a person. So I think a creative role, what it essentially needs to be is that you just need to make sure that you understand who the target consumer is of the roles and the brands that you're applying for. And that could be varied. So you might have applications going out to like luxury brands or fast fashion brands. And ultimately you want to sort of tailor your approach to each brand that you apply for. So that means tailoring your portfolio, tailoring your CV, and also probably tailoring your attitude as well, because the roles are going to be different. It's a completely different demographic for some of the brands that you could be applying for. So I think essentially you want to make sure that you are adaptable in that sense. I think that's probably what a strong creative candidate can be. And as well, sometimes you can work for a brand in a creative role, and the target consumer might even change for the brand that you're applying for, because you might think actually, you might slightly sort of target an older customer, and the range might change from like 18 to 25 to 35 years old. So you might need to sort of change your approach. So I think a strong creative candidate can be adaptable to that, adaptable to change, and be able to sort of cope with that.
Great. So we're in our last 10 minutes now. So I'm going to try and squeeze in a few more questions. I was going to say from the floor, but this isn't a live event. It is a live event. It's not an in-person event. Question here from Janet. I think this is following on what you were saying, Chris. Should we remove the reference section completely from our CV? Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, in the States, you do. I mean, it's understood that references are available on request. It just takes up real estate at this point.
Okay. Next question here I've picked out is, how long should the description be under our experiences? It says
4 or 5 sentences, just punchy short paragraph.
Fantastic. And then we've got,
and really quick bullet points are better.
Yeah, well, Karima's mentioned that a few times. I've got one. Let's have a look here. What are good questions for candidates to ask in an interview?
Do your research on a company. Most recruiters, direct employer recruiters, they want to know that you want to work for that company, that you're not having an interview just to get a job. So any sort of research that you do, I mean, there's so much information available to job seekers today that you should go into every interview, really wanting to know about that company. Maybe that's, look up their stock price, look up, what their, the news. There's just so much information that if you go into an interview flat-footed like that without having those types of questions, you're dooming yourself to not getting that job.
Especially nowadays, I'd be definitely looking up stock prices and Companies House and all that. So that's Companies House here in the UK. I'm not sure what it is in the States. Just finding out how that business is performing. Sometimes I know that's why merchandise and stuff, because they're quite financially astute, I would say, they tend to A lot of my merchandiser friends do that. Another question here from Gerline: how many works should one show in a portfolio, and what should be prioritized work, etc.? Was it uni work or work, or who'd like that one? No one?
Well, the most recent work is always going to get you, the most attention. If you have enough, work in your portfolio not to show your university work, do that, because most university work portfolios are crap. You know what I mean? They just look awful. You know what I mean? Sorry. That's usually the way it is. And so the more real world experience you have and portfolio you can show, the better.
What keywords should be on an entry level fashion designer resume stroke CV? I'll come to you with that, Chris, because obviously you've spoken.
Yeah, the words that you see in the job listing are the words that need to be on your resume. And you got to think, if it says assistant technical designer or tech design assistant, those are different keywords. So you have to run through the different permutations. If you check out the AI, we've got a couple different articles on Style Dispatch about using AI. A lot of times you can use the prompts in, like, say, ChatGPT to evaluate the job listing against your resume and have the AI come up with the words that an algorithm bot is going to look for to key on to make sure your resume gets to that next level. So, look at the words in the job description. If they're not on your resume, on the Go version of your resume, you can actually just have a keyword section at the end of your resume that has the different permutations of these words. So an example, let's say Illustrator, but the ad says Adobe Creative Suite. Okay, well, now you make sure you have Adobe Creative Suite. They basically mean the same thing, you know what I mean, in terms of the fashion industry. But, look for the words that might mean the same but aren't on your resume. Make sure they're included in your keyword bank.
Question from Daisy: best advice for cold emailing, LinkedIn messaging for work experience and internships? Anyone will pick that up? Amy, you've got, because obviously you did look.
Yeah, I've probably received quite a few messages like that before in my time, actually. So, I think actually what I'd probably say and suggest is anything that you'd probably typically put in a covering letter, put that in a message. So make it like a short, like, paragraph message, like a recruiter or a head of department. I probably actually always go with a department or a hiring manager rather than a recruiter, actually, just because I think they're normally ones that have probably been in that situation as well and can help. So I'd probably just say everything that I would probably put in a CV in a covering letter. So why you want to work for them, why that specific role and why that specific brand, and just say why you're looking for experience, what transferable skills you've got. Because most of the time, even if people haven't worked in the industry, even if they've got any sort of part-time experience in retail, in a cafe, in a pub, like, it's still, speaking to a consumer directly, it's still being organized, it's still prioritizing your time, it's still loads of skills that you probably do in the fashion industry. So I think you want to make sure that you try and transfer that across the fashion industry and let people know. And that's when I think that bit that I said before about doing extra work alongside your CV always helps, because it'll help you get that experience or get an internship. If you're looking to do buy-in, send them a SWOT that you've done on the brand that you're applying for. It doesn't have to be a detailed thing, even a really super mini one that's tailored to that brand. I think they're more likely to give you a chance than if you just send a generic CV that you send to like 100 different companies. So that's what I would suggest doing.
Okay, we've got a couple more minutes left for a couple more questions, and we ain't going to do them all, I'm afraid, but I'll come to you on this one, Rachel. Any tips for CV applying, CV v agency v in-house? Tailored CV or?
As in directly to a brand versus with agency?
Well, the actual question is, any tips for CV applying to agency v in-house? Should it be the same CV or should it be slightly different?
Yeah, exactly the same CV. I'd probably go back to circulating what Amy said. Like, if you do really want to work for a brand internally, say you're at uni, you are trying to do the whole internship or something like that, do utilize things like LinkedIn to figure out who the hiring managers are. So who is the senior buyer, who's the head of buy-in, try and connect with them, raise your profile that way. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the actual application, it's no different what I read versus somebody in-house.
And then I'll try and squeeze this last question in here. Does anyone have any recommendations for someone who finished a fashion degree 10 years ago and is now trying to get experience? Who'd like that one? can I come to you, Karima, maybe?
Yeah. I think it's funny when we attended a speed mentoring event and with young talents, we had this conversation. I think there's a sector or type of agencies that young talents, freshly graduated profiles should never ignore, is those little creative agencies. So what I discovered as well over the years, you have very senior designers who have worked for the most prestigious brands, who have developed their own brands or who are consulting now. So they have their own creative agency and they hire a lot of young talents. And it's a fantastic opportunity, as an intern, as a young designer, to learn from someone who has obviously a massive experience, a broad one, and also, working in a small agency, you would really have the benefit of being really under the direct supervision of someone who can mentor you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, can I jump in on that one real quick?
Yeah,
as far as somebody
quick.
that, let's say they got a fashion design degree 10 years ago and they don't have the experience, life threw them a curveball. And so they're not working in that. A big deal is to have, to update your professional skills, even if it doesn't really help you, but you need to have like certifications and, short courses or whatever it is that shows that you're up to date with things. So if you haven't worked in the industry for 10 years, but now you took a short course at the Fashion Institute or, Parsons or whatever it is over there that shows that you're relevant and you're staying on top of your skills, that's going to go a long way. If, the technology in 10 years changes so much that degree, unless you show that you're keeping up with things, is useless. You know what I mean? So you really need to show that you're working in a creative field or that you are keeping on top of those skills, continuously improving yourself for a recruiter to acknowledge that or to consider you for a position. And then if you've been out of the industry for 10 years or you've never made it into the industry, you're going to have to work for probably less than what someone your same age would normally work for. And you just got to be able to, suck that up and do that for a year or two and then prove your worth and move back up. I've
often seen people do that though. They get back into it quicker than a lot of people who are younger because of life skills and stuff like that. Guys, we're absolutely out of time. I'm so sorry for anybody whose questions we missed, but thank you out there listening in for all the questions and comments that you put in. Guys, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup for your time and your insights today. Just to remind everybody, this recording will be on our YouTube channel. So if you've signed up to this session, we'll be sending an email around to everyone thanking you, and we'll send you a link to the YouTube channel. So Chris, Rachel, Karima, Amy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll be in touch soon and speak to you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, y'all. Great panel. You guys are awesome.
Thanks.